piece of jewellery. Look at that. So looking at my design, I'm going to start, I think I mentioned earlier when I was at the computer, I mentioned earlier it's just two parts this ring really, just the collet and the shank. So relatively straightforward. So I'm going to start with the collet first, so working with the stone a lot. I'm going to do, should I do square wire claws? I might even do round wire claws. Do round wire claws? Yeah, I want round wire claws. And then I quite like the shank, how it's quite square and blocky. Got nice flat sides on it, maybe a very subtle D shape around the back there. I'll decide when I've got it made, but I might have like 3, maybe 5 stones down the side. Odd numbers are nice because you have like a top and a bottom and a middle one. So odd number amount of stones down the shoulders is always a good thing. Not essential obviously, whatever you want in your design. Yeah, I just think this stone is a bit more cushion shape, so a round claw would suit it nicer. Yeah, I'm going for a round claw. I'll keep this flat and yeah, doing that bottom bezel like that. So to start, I'm going to make, okay, so to start I'm going to do this piece and get the stone sitting on it how I want it to sit. Be doing that in square wire like this. So let's roll some wire down. Right, now I'm looking at my stone I've got to use, and I'm looking at this, comparing the two. What I'm thinking first of all is, let me put the stone down safely. See that? This is so different to what I normally do. That's a really spindly little bit of metal. So to get that kind of effect, I mean it's halfway down the stone and there's loads of the stone sticking out the bottom. So I use these a lot just to kind of get an idea of what I need to do. I mean loads of stone sticking out the bottom, halfway down. I mean, what's my measurement? That's literally like 1.8 mil deep, that would be on this stone to make it look the same. So nothing. So I can literally, what I'm going to do is get a bit of square section wire, 2 mil, and I'll literally just use that, and then I'll make it just the right size so when the stone drops down and it's all cut out, it will drop down onto it nice and snug, phrase out the inside so the stone is there, seated comfortably. I don't know how to do that bottom bezel, could just turn it up out of slightly thinner gauge wire. You could make a plate, really like simple way to do it is make a plate and then just curve it and then cut it out. That's nice, it's got no join, but it's not ideal if you're working in gold or platinum, it's quite wasteful. But turning it up by wire is a lot harder and a lot more difficult to get the same good finish. I'll think about it more when I get to it. Like, let me just get some square 2 mil wire, and then I'll turn it up and show you what's going on with that. Right, I made 2 mil wire and it still looked way too chunky compared to this design, so I've gone down to just under 1.8 now, just a bit. Still looks kind of heavy, but then it gives me space to file it back if I need to, because I'm going to be filing that underwards angle on it. So if you're making something similar, making along with me, use your wire, whatever you've done, anneal it, straighten it, and then we'll start turning it up for the stone. Okay, we are going to make it going around the stone and then finishing there. So that's where the shank will join on, so the join will be hidden there. And I've got no worries when it's finished, and I'm polishing any little lines to show up anywhere around it. Also, all 4 corners will be identical because I'm cutting it and bending it. If I started there, this side and this side would be filed up like really sharp, and then these ones will be cut and bent. There's a slight roundness to them when you turn them. So just for the sake of filing it up when it's all finished, it's better to have all 4 corners made identically. Also, you can hide the join by making it from there to there, so that's why I do that. Okay, so I just put it next to my stone to get an idea. I'm going to put a little first corner about there. Now this is just off square, so I want the narrowest way going up and down, if that makes sense. So this is my wide side. Just put a little nick in it. Let's get this started. down about a quarter is plenty, quarter, third, as far as you want really. I'm going to file into it like at least 3/4 of the way through, so you may as well just cut 3/4 of the way through. Make filing easier as well. Sometimes I start with a 3 square, sometimes I just go straight to my square one, but basically you want to finish on your square file because you need that 90-degree angle so you can get a nice proper corner on it. Just go in there, rock it backwards and forwards, just start it off and then file down into it. Keep filing, look at the end and see how far you're going. Go down 2/3 to 3/4, like fast forward a few minutes later, literally just file down in a straight line. So I've got this V out of my claw now, and I'll tell you what I do carefully. I like using parallel pliers, there's no chance of the metal bending anywhere other than your join. I bend it a little bit, because that's thin now, you don't want to risk snapping that off. Now I will flux it, and then anneal it, and then fold it right up, and then it's ready for soldering. And I like to solder one at a time. You don't have to. You could technically get to this stage, get them all bent at right angles, and then go around soldering it. But I like the idea of each one being finished and as strong as possible before moving on to the next one. Just to show you this before I solder it, that's what you're aiming for. You cut out that little V shape and it should fold up exactly 90 degrees and be completely closed up, not all gappy. Remember one of my previous videos about the importance of a tight join? That just always applies with soldering, so like that. Tight join, get it? Okay, so I've soldered up my first corner. Now I need to work out where to put the next corner, because obviously the positioning of it is very important. The way I do that is make sure that's flat, this is flat, and I just hold the stone. I'm not even thinking about how high it is on the stone, just getting it in the right position. So I want it kind of just behind there, and there, and I'm moving that corner up towards that corner because I want that corner to sort of maybe right on the edge. I'm putting a round claw on, and that round claw will be cut into that stone, so it needs to, the claw will go into that and set the stone without being bent. So I'm thinking about how that angle of that claw is going to go on, its position going inwards, as well as the position of that on the stone. Because obviously the more out I go, the higher that's going to sit up. But I need to think a bit more cleverly because I just want the outside to be at a certain position, and then I'm scooping out the inside there to get the stone to sit down onto it. So I'm probably not making any sense to you the way I'm speaking, because I'm not very good at explaining things. This is something I will work on for future videos. Right, so what I'm doing is just lining up the edges, moving it, the corner of the stone towards the corner of my bit of metal, and then I'm just going to put my thumb right at the edge of my thumb right there, and just with whatever, put a little line on it. Now that's not accurate and I can't use that, so then I just put my stone on again exactly like I did before, flat, line up the edges, move a bit towards the corner, and no, that would be a bit too small. But now I've got a guide. I think it'll be about that much too small. Again, putting the stone on, checking it. Yeah, a little bit more perhaps. Like the tiniest bit more, and I think that's correct. And then that allows to be hidden under the stone. Should sit up the stone at the right height. And then thinking about that claw going on the corner, being cut into the metal, and then just hitting the stone just enough for it to be set, without the claw having to bend towards a stone or out. This, I reckon, is the hardest thing about making jewellery, is getting finished piece correct for a specific stone. So to understand a lot of angles, you've got to think a few steps ahead. It's actually harder to explain what I'm doing. I think comes from your knowledge, comes from experience a lot better than just being told it. Yeah, I'm going for that. I quite like my little line there. So I'm going to put my saw cut in my line I just drew on that, and that should do. That should do. Second one, nice tight join. Let's have a look at the stone. I don't know if that's going to show up really on camera, but I've got it just inside the edges. Yeah, once I scooped it out, it should work quite nicely. Just got the corners kind of poking out either side of those, so allowing for a little bit off the sides, with plenty of thickness there left over to scoop out the inside to get this stone sitting down. Because at the moment, in the correct position, it's like there, so it's sitting really, really low. So I want to scoop it out, get that stone sitting right down into it, and then we're going to end up something a bit more like that. Sorry. That. This is a little Brucey bonus. Okay. These digital calipers, they have a use other than just measuring stuff very accurately. These two lines are beautiful little adjustable parallel lines, and you can use them for your benefit, checking how good you are. I'm going to give you a bit of a close-up on that. So you can check things you've made. Like I put this side flat, and just lower that one into it, lower that side onto it, and then see, just looking at the gap, see how accurate it is. So forget about the numbers, it's just looking at these two parallel lines. I can't speak today. Parallel lines. Third one done, nice tight join. Checking it with your set square, or this trick again, checking your parallels. That one was really important because obviously you've got to get that distance correct, that distance correct. This one, a little bit easier perhaps because you've got this end as a guide to where it goes, but don't totally rely on that. Keep putting your stone on it. And another thing about using your stone, when you get to this stage, if I just drop that on, it kind of sits down a bit, and it's because stones, not always perfectly symmetrical, very rarely perfectly symmetrical unless you've got perfect diamonds. Especially coloured stones are always a bit wonky on the back. Curves are different all the way each side, and then where it goes down to a point is usually a bit off. So you can't rely on just where it sits. You have to look to the edges of the stone and hold it in position and get it in the right way. So if you just let go of it, it will sit one side more than the other. So you can't use that as a guide. So you have to hold it in position, looking at the edges, over the edges of what you've made. So when you get to this stage, done my last corner, what I'm going to do is that bit sticking out, like the very first end, I'm going to cut that off down the middle, get that nice and flat as perfectly as possible, and then this one, I'm going to cut it on purpose slightly too long, so when I'm closing that down onto it, I'm not aiming to get it to touch and be perfect first time. I want them to be just slightly too long so they touch slightly up, like this is flat, this is finished. I want them to touch here, and then I'll put a saw cut through it, they go a bit closer, saw cut through it, and then hopefully they land perfectly touching and perfectly flat and straight. This is a stage where you've got to be careful, because if it's too short, then the sides are going to be in like that, and you've kind of ballsed it all up. So you're going to have to pull them back out again, and you're going to have a gap, and you're kind of a bit stuck really. So yeah, be careful getting this last bit correct. I look red today. In my previous videos, I was always talking about how cold it was in the houses in Japan. Guess what now? It's too hot. April the 9th, 2020. It's already too hot. Okay, what I'm doing now, just annealing and milling out this big chunk of metal, and this is going to be my shank, and show you on this one. See, there's a big split in the shoulder, and there's something I really hate, and it's quite a normal thing to do in the jewellery trade, but I really hate it, is you cut out a section of shank, and then you drop a shoulder down onto it and solder it in position. I just hate it because there's a solder line on the side and on there, and it can cause you problems after polishing. It's I don't know, I just hate it. I just feel it's like a bodge job. It's like you just cut a piece out and then you have to add a bit back in a different position. And for me, it just feels like a bodge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cleverly mill this out, mill it thinner, which will be that section of the ring, and then leave it a bit fatter on the ends so I can cut down it and then open it up and then get that split design with no solder joins. So that's the way I'm going to do it. This was in the assay, that's why I picked up that shank. Just to show you this, no collet punch, didn't even take a measurement. All I did was compare it to the stone all the time to get my measurements where to put the corners, and then it was a combination of that and knowing what a right angle looks like, and then I've ended up with this, very accurate. So this is a nice little bit of metal now. Put my stone on there, look at it from the side, see what's what. When I start cutting away the inside, that stone's going to drop right down, and then I've got a nice snug fitting belly shaped, cushiony shaped, big bellied stone sitting comfortably on a bezel which is completely flat on the outside. So I tapped it flat, can go around it a little bit, just sort of what I call perfect it up, just get everything really nice and straight and nice, which I'm not worried about the corners because they're going to be cut into for the claws. Just make sure everything's nice and parallel. I've only actually filed one side. What I'm doing now is that outer shape, I've got to put that angle on it so it's a nice tapered collet. So I'm just going to file that on before I start filing so I know where I'm going. Decide which is your top or bottom. It's usually one seems more suitable than the other for some reason. So I'm just looking at it on the stone, get an idea what kind of angle I want to go for, not too under. Just a kind of normal taper I'm going for. So I'll literally just hold it on my peg and start filing away that edge. Have a look, see what's going on. Do one side, then do the opposite, get them to match perfectly, and then move on to the other two, the ends, and then get those to match perfectly, and then rotate it and make sure everything's all making sense. You've got the same angles all the way around. So I put that angle on, and then I run the file across it that way, make sure it's all going nice and straight. Top is still untouched. I'm not really filing it right up to that top edge, keeping that width there. Just doing the ends. Check my angles on them. They're all the same. This one's not. Okay, it's a bit better. Run the file along this way. Alright, I'll leave that like that. Still needs a bit of work around the inside to get it all really perfect, but it's good enough to continue. Right, let me get on with this bit of shank now. I'm going to square this off so it's all nice and sharp, and then narrow it so I've got the width of the shank I want, and then that will also give me the depth I need to split it open and then make those shoulders. Yeah, and then flatten out probably about that much across the middle. I need to right, what am I doing? I am moving on to the shank, so I've got to decide the width I want. Looking at that, I've got to create something with the same feel, so not that with a big chunky shank. It's just kind of that. That's what our imaginary customer wants. They want kind of that, but with this stone. So what I do is I kind of know what, without taking measurements, I just sort of know with the metal, but it might be an idea to just kind of open these up and have a look at the gap next to the stone, see what you think might feel. Got to imagine the claws sticking out the side, so it'll have a bit more of a kind of chunky look to it. I'm about to start milling out that center section. Now remember, when you're milling your metal, it gets longer as you mill it, so that might be a thing you need to consider. Yes, you literally just put it in there. See, I forgot to mention, I put little lines on where I want it to, where I want to mill out. So about that much. Depends on the size of the ring, obviously. This is quite a small size. I'm going for like KL, something like that. So yeah, just clamp it down in the middle. Roll it up to my line, go to my other line, back to the middle, squeeze it a little bit more, do there, just keep going. Obviously stop and anneal it sometimes. Let me go a bit more of that towards that side. Oosh! There you go, just flattening it out along there. You don't need to flatten that much, because then obviously that section and that section is going to be the shoulder, especially a big stone. It's a lot of distance across the finger, so the shank is not actually that long. Anneal your bit of metal if you're making it. Take your large half-round pliers, and if you don't have these because they don't sell them, you should make them, like I always say in my videos. Get a big chunky pair of pliers. I bought these from Brick Lane Market, about £1, which was a lot. Yeah, and then using a grinder, just grind away. Doesn't have to be that accurate. Get rid of the teeth on that side, round that off, and then make yourself a nice handle. This is just shoelace glued on. It's a good tool, use it all the time. Once you get used to using these, you can put so much power into that, because the handles are longer, so you're squeezing further down, you've got a lot of power, and they're just more comfortable because they're sort of a thicker handle. These are short handle, very sharp, and you can break these. I've broken 2 of these, I think, in my career. They're too thin. They're too spindly and crap. I don't know why you can't buy them like this size. Anyway, make your own, is cheaper and more fun. Turn that up into a wedding ring. Start with the ends. See that? Wallop. And I'll just curve that all the way around. And I'm going to turn that right up into a full circle and then solder it up. The reason is, when it's soldered up, I can put it on my stick and give it a tap with the hammer. Metal hammer, not your rawhide mallet. Open the window and throw your rawhide mallet out. You never need it. Yeah, so then it's on the stick, I can tap it round, get it perfectly round. And then I'll open it up and then get it ready for the collet, which I still have not made. Alright, so now I've got this shape. Turned it up, soldered it up, annealed it all when I was soldering, and just filed around the inside. Can you do me a favour, please, when you're hammering it around, look around the whole thing and make sure there's no gaps there. There's not like a big gap one side. Tap it with your metal hammer. Do it both sides, double checking, because if there's a gap bigger one side than the other, that means it's not round. And I've just noticed the time's coming up 5 o'clock. I've got to prep for an English lesson now, so that was my fun few hours in the afternoon. See you tomorrow, and we'll continue with this. Welcome to tomorrow. I've got no idea what I was saying yesterday or what I was doing exactly when I ended the video, but now I'm just going to do exactly what I want to do, and that is I pick this up and I want to get that stone sitting down at the correct height on it. So I'm just going to ball phrase it out, and then get that stone to drop right down. And this video, I'm calling it a full instructional guide, but I'm not going into as much detail as I usually do on my full instructionals. My main thing for this video is like if you're a jeweler and you're offering to make things for people, this kind of thing is going to happen. Someone will love a ring like this, but the stone in that, very sharp, straight, parallel edges, but they're giving you a stone which is all cushion shaped and rounded. So you've got to think and find a way to get this effect with stones that are not correct for it. So I'm just showing you that's possible. Okay, if you're doing this, just to state the obvious, make sure you're going to phrase away the top, because you may have already filed the angles on the sides. Make sure you start cutting away the right side of it. Put it on there, have a look, have a close look, study it all the way around when it's sitting completely flat on there, nice and horizontal. See where the stone is touching it, all the way around. If you made it kind of accurately for the shape of the stone, it should be touching all 4 sides at the same time, not balancing on 2 and then being able to slide around. But even if it is a little bit, it's not the end of the world because you're about to cut it away, so you can make adjustments as you go along. But yeah, loop it if you have to. Use your 10 times loop, have a close look, see what's going on. And then you're literally just cutting away where it's touching. And obviously the more you cut away, the more it drops down. It's going to change as the curvature changes and different facets hit as it gets lower. So you need to keep looking at it as you're cutting away. But basically, I think I can really hack into this one. So when I put my stone on and loop it, I can see it's touching on that lower edge of where I'm cutting, not the outer edge. So I know not to go out any wider with that top bit. Just take a bit of metal out from the bottom half of where I'm cutting on these sides more than the ends. And the only reason I know that is because I used my 10 times loop when the stone was sat in position. This is specific for that stone. So it doesn't matter what that looks like, just get the stone fitting. Got my dot on the corner, 2 black dots, so I'm confident that's the way the stone goes. Balance it, obviously be careful. Even if you've got a cheap stone, be very careful with it. It's just good practice, because one day you'll be working on something very expensive, and if you never practice being careful with it, you might end up dropping it or scratching it, banging a tool against it. So just, no matter what you're working on, always be super careful. Like, I'm treating this as carefully as I would as like a £10,000 tanzanite. But I don't know if you can tell from earlier in the video, that's dropping, stone's dropping lower, so that's going up higher up the stone. And I'm looking at my my pictures I'm copying, making sure I don't go too high or keep it too low. So I'm going to drop it down a little bit more and it should be okay. And then once I've got the stone down, I'm going to take a bit of meat off the sides, just reduce the size of that a bit. I don't want this big flat on the side, I don't need that. And it's too big anyway. So yeah, I will be reducing the size of that a little bit. I've got space to do it. This is a good trick that I do often. Just get a bit of blue tack, stick it on top of the stone, and then hold the stone upside down. Just make sure I've got that right way around. Just line up your black dots. And then just, with the stone upside down, balance the bezel on top. And make sure it's sitting straight under its own weight. It's like nice and central where you want it to be in its best position. Using your 10 times loop again, have a look around where the stone's touching if you're still trying to get the stone to drop down lower. So it's not always about putting the stone on top. It's nice to actually just let it sit there and see exactly what's going on. So, a bit more work than I thought it was going to be. I've cut out loads of metal. See that shape? Very roundedy looking. Now the stone drops in quite nicely. It's fitting quite snug all the way around, no like big gaps more than the other side. I like the height it's at. So my bottom bezel, see that? It's curved, it's down quite low below the stone. I might not put mine quite that low, just because it sort of looks like, I mean, they've got so much gap underneath that stone, it's almost like they didn't know what they were doing when they made it. So I want mine to sit very close. I think it shows skill and ability, and you can make things properly. So yeah, mine's going to be, even touching the stone, it's going to be really gappy, which is the look my imaginary customer wants. And what my imaginary customer wants, my imaginary customer gets. Next I'm going to make this bit, and not totally happy with the way I'm going to do it because I think it's quite wasteful, but at the same time it's not really. I'm going to make a plate and then hammer it in the swage block, get that curvature, and then just cut out the centre, and then I've got a nice shape with no solder joint. The only other way is to actually turn it up with wire and then swage block it, and there's a lot of faffing about. Now, this is going to be the more accurate way to do it. That's fine, yeah, do that. Yeah, so I'm going to make a plate, swage block it, get that curvature for the finger size I want, then cut it out the size I want. Alright, now I've milled out my bit of metal. Now this is important, this next step, and I think it's something that a self-taught jeweller may not consider. Also, I reckon there's apprentice jewellers being taught by people who don't really know much about making jewellery. They're probably not getting told the importance of this. Something like this. See, that's quite thin. There's no really room for filing the curvature differently once it's in there. So it's got to be correct. to the finger size you need when you're putting it in. So if you have an imaginary customer like me, you need to know their finger size. And then this, now, way before we're finishing the ring, we're considering the finished piece. So get the finger size right. So we're making things specifically for the finger size it's got to end up as. Alrighty, so got my bit of milled out metal there. What I do is, to show you how I go about this, I put that on there and then I scratch around it just so I've got a kind of rough guide of how big that is. Then I like to cut that out, and then I'm gonna put that in the swage block and get it to the right curvature for my finger size. And then we'll work with this piece and get it exactly the right size for the height that's got to sit, and have the, it's obviously got to be smaller than that, but it's got to be smaller exactly so my claws follow the angles I want them to, and it sits at the right height for the stone, not to be sticking out the bottom and then not to be too high up as well. So it's a bit tricky. This is like a go carefully, skillful, understand angles and heights and measurements, and yeah, sort of feel your way along, I call it. Okay, so I cut that out and put the curve in it for the finger size I want, L1/2. And I like the stage of making a ring. You've just got a pile of bits, and then you've done all the hard bits, all your measurements and working out, so you just kind of a case of cracking on with it and putting it all together. So we're assembling this collet now for the stone, and I've got this bit and this bit, put it all together, and it's not immediately obvious how you're going to do that and get this measurement exactly what you want, and it's all lining up all perfectly, it's all perfectly angled and correct for the stone, all mathematically, symmetrically correct, and I'll show you how I'm going to do it. So now we're picking up and working with our stone. I mention this in all my videos, and I will continue to do so. Sweep out your skin, no tools, no lemel in there, as kind of insurance for not damaging your stone. If you drop that, see, that did not matter. And if you've got one of those bench tins or like a wooden drawer that pulls out, why have you got that? It's just dangerous for when you're working on stones. I don't understand why they are made and sold. Okay, so check this out. I've got a little dot on the side there, line it up with a dot on my stone, so I know these are, it's going in the correct way around. Gently put it in position. It should sit in there quite well if you were accurate cutting it out. It shouldn't be sliding about all over the place. Make sure that's sat in there nice and straight. If you can hold it from the sides and then bring this piece up to it, also grip that on those fingers. Get it all lined up nice and horizontal. The stone is down as far as it can go. Bring that up to it. So the collet, the collet, the point, whatever you want to call it, is touching that bit of metal as the stone sits down as low as possible, and it's all perfectly straight. That's important to get this measurement right. So you have to fiddle with it a little bit. So that's about right for mine. Just get that in the middle. Now you've got that gap. That gap is now the maximum this collet can be open. Get a bit of metal, either exactly the same or a tiny bit less, so the point of that stone will drop down. If you lower that slightly, the point of the stone will drop down into there, which is ideal. If you can end up with that in there, then that's a nicely made piece of jewellery. If it's too high, the kind of collet is too high, higher than it needed to be, and that's not very good, I think. And obviously if it's sticking out the bottom, then that's terrible. It's too small, and then it's just a danger to the stone. It's uncomfortable to the person wearing the ring. It's not good. So avoid that at all costs. More important, it doesn't come out there. But if you can get it sitting in the middle of that bit of depth of that bit of metal, I think that's really perfect. And that shows you had a lot of control when you were making the ring and you got it going exactly how you wanted to. So what we're going to do is get your bit of metal, lay that on top, so it's going straight across the middle, and then we're just going to, what we call, tack it on. So it's just a tiny bit of solder. I think really only one side you need to do it. It's just enough to hold it in position with a relative amount of strength. It's going to be cut out later, so it's not important what the solder joint looks like, so as long as it's holding it in position. For a nugget of advice, while this is open, you may as well hit it with a buff stick, get that perfectly smooth and flat. Saves it you trying it later on when it's more difficult when it's all enclosed. So get it papered nice and flat now. What's useful if you've got a bit of metal on there which is slightly too tall for the gap you want, I now have space to put my half round file, put a file, little dip in there, and then that will sit on very comfortably and just hold in position in that little groove, and then it will be at the right height as well. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll just plonk it down and then solder it on. You should have something a bit like that, a little construction. Have a look around it. Does everything look nice and flat and symmetrical? Is that curve nice and central? Is that curve nice and central to the middle? Get some measurements. What have I got? 2.20 that side. See that? 2.2. Put it in here. Oh, 2.22. Very accurate. Well done, Chris. So now, what should we do now? Yeah, let's cut away the sides and get it as close as possible to what we want. So chopping that off, someone at the door. I'm chopping that off, close enough to start filing. Get a nice coarse file. Be very careful with that top bit. That's just a thin bit of metal now, remember? So don't really push it against your peg when you're filing. Just hold it kind of gently. I'm probably not even going to touch my peg. I'll hold it in my fingers. Yeah, just keep it in mind that you can't put any weight on that really. So a nice coarse file because it will cut quicker with the less amount of effort, and yeah, get those angles right, following what you've already put on there, ideally. You've already filed your angles on this top plate, yeah? So use that as a guide to know where you're trying to file down to. And I'd recommend doing one side, then the opposite. Get those angles perfectly matching and symmetrical. Excuse me. And then do your other two sides opposite each other. Get those same angles as that. Okay, so you should have something like this. Check your angles. Is that angle the same as that angle? Is it nice and even, nice and symmetrical, matching both sides? And then is that angle the same as that angle? And then is that angle the same as that angle? Just go around it, double checking everything. Your curve. Is the top of that curve directly in the middle? It should be. Have a look from this side. This is a good angle to look at. You should have a nice even kind of amount of difference all the way around it if your angles are correct. So the difference in size between the top one and the bottom one is sort of a nicely scaled down version of the top one, so there should be a nice parallel line you can see around it. I think mine needs a little bit of adjusting, but it's kind of there. And yes, we have not cut out this back bit yet because it's only joined in the middle. If we cut it out, they're just gonna fall apart. So next step is to put the claws on. Once we've got this, get it exactly perfect, paper it flat, then we'll put the claws on exactly how they need to be to get correct for the stone. I know it's a bit annoying because the claws will be in the way, but then we cut it out because when the claws are holding those two bits together, then it's safe to cut out that center section. Once you've papered it up a little bit, it should really start to look like it's taking shape nicely. Another little top tip for you. Pendant loop, yeah, you've got this nice kind of a large finger size maybe, but put that on top and then have a look. How do you think it looks on there? Is it sitting quite nicely? You imagine it on a shank. Is it sitting like flat but slightly to the side? I really hate that in rings when they're put in wrong. It's got to be dead central and straight down to the center. So use your loop. It's a good good thing. You've got that perfect curve there. Also, you can sort of slide it up the side, making sure you like all your angles. Kind of shows off, gives you a bit more of a look into the future of the finished ring. Okay, so we've got to put our claws on, make sure we're getting the angles right and the positions right for setting. Now we need the stone to drop into it, and it doesn't because we've got that bar in there. So what I'm doing is drilling right down through it, and I'm going to cut away that bar as much as possible to get that stone right down, but being careful not to completely remove the section that is soldered, because at the moment that bottom solder, that solder there is the only thing holding that bottom together against the top, so we don't want that to fall off just yet. So you see what I've done, I cut a little line in there, there's still solder touching either side of that line, so it's still pretty safe, but now I'm just going to ball phrase it away until my stone can drop down. After fitting the stone into your top plate, you should be good at this. Add a bit of practice. This is much easier. You can get away with being a lot less careful. Basically, keep taking metal away until the stone doesn't touch it anymore. Stone goes down, have a look from the side, see where it's touching. Nearly there, it's got to take a bit more back at the top. With ball phrases, I just ripped into it without too much care. It doesn't matter what it looks like, it's just get that metal out of the way so that stone can drop down. And now it's dropped down to its maximum, where it's now sitting again on the bezel. And just like I said was going to happen, I wanted to happen, the point is just sort of there. It's just gone down into that metal, which is proof that my techniques work. If you follow me with my techniques and my methods, I'll train you up to be the best jeweller. Progressed a little bit, done a little bit of work. I ended up filing the sides in a little bit more just to get the dimensions down even more. Because you've got that cushion shape stone going over these long flat edges, I want to bring it in as much as possible because the corners stick out quite a long way. So I've just put a flat on two of them. I will then get a cylinder phrase, cut into it, get one claw in a perfect position, the angle and the distance, and then replicate that all the way around. You should always try and make jewellery accurately and neatly. You see this little groove I've put in my collet? It's just right for the width of my claw. So now all I got to do, because this is accurate and neat, the next stage becomes very easy. That claw just sits nicely in its little groove, won't move about. So that's in position. I'll put that in the slot in my peg. Little groove I got there, I mentioned in previous videos, and now that's just in a good position, ready for soldering, very easy. Okay, I just pulled it out of the acid after putting the third claw on. Now, if you've seen my other videos making collets, you'll know about this. See this claw behind? That should disappear behind this one. Okay, right, first of all, have a look at that edge and that edge, rock it backwards and forwards so they line up perfectly. Now, rotate it this way. So now, with those lined up, I'm looking at that claw and that claw. The one behind it should disappear behind it at exactly the moment it's directly forward. Do you know what I mean? See that? See the parallel, but only when simultaneously that edge and that edge are level. So just on the sort of horizon in the background, and then that one there. So that point, see what I mean? Like you see that one, the claw behind just disappears at the same time, while that is simultaneously just on the edge of that. That way I know both these claws are at the same angle, so I can look at it that way, confidently they're like this, nicely, and all lined up nicey. And then the same with all the other claws as well, so you should be able to rotate the whole thing. Another little test you can do is put it on your metal block. It should just sit nice and flat, not like all rocking about or one claw sticking up, or not like that. Just both claws flat on there. And then same with that way. Both claws flat on there, directly sitting up nice and vertically, not rocking about. It's a good test for how accurate your claws are, and it should just look nice as well, not like a kind of drunken spider all over the place. Right, all 4 claws are on my collet, so that's pretty much finished, apart from a bit of tidying up. Picking up the shank again, so just looking at it. If you've made something, just give it a whack on the metal block, make sure it's flat. Then file the sides. What's this picture? Yeah, they're perfectly parallel all the way around, which I quite like. Yeah, get it flat, file it so it's parallel all the way across. Select your weapon. Right, another few days have gone by. I only get a few hours in the afternoon to make these videos, by the way, so just making one thing can go on like a week. Right, again, got no idea what I was saying last time I was filming. This still needs a lot of work, but the claws are on, kind of complete. Just got to tidy it up a little bit, and yeah, just tidy it up a little bit, and then that's done. There's a few things to tell you about doing that as well. Picked up my shank. We need to make these shoulders, these split shoulders, which isn't a hard thing to do. Just takes a bit of faffing about, because these quite. I really like these shoulders. They're nice and straight all the way down to there, and then that one follows the curve around the finger. Obviously, how much you've got to open those shoulders. The bottom one has got to join onto that. Top one's got to join onto that. So we need to. There's quite an open space, so we're gonna have to cut quite far back from the join. So I won't cut a section out first. I will just split it down the solder line, and then start sawing down the middle, and then open it up and see what I've got. Alright, first thing I'm going to do going about this is get my dividers, open them up to the depth of that bottom section of the shoulder, perhaps a little bit more, give me a bit of room for error when I'm sawing. Okay, that's quite a nice distance, and then top one's nice and thick as well. So not halfway, we're going down to the sort of bottom third really. This is not a how to saw things video, but just in case you're interested in how I'm doing it, with my divided lines on there, opened it up a little bit, just pulled it open with my fingers, put it on the peg, hold it down, and then just saw along the line. So just quickly, not too carefully, got 2 cuts down my shank now. Notice the top one, very straight. That one follows the curve of the ring. So I am literally, just with my little knife, gonna pick it open a little bit, both sides. And then with pliers, carefully get that one straight. The old paper disc making an appearance in the videos as usual. Get rid of this lump. What I decided to do is push it back up to a circle and then join up the bottom part of the shoulders. So I soldered these back together, tapped it round, and now I can really be accurate and get them really perfect. Get that perfectly parallel all the way across, both sides, nice and flat, nice and smooth, go into a perfect point both ends. Both of these are accurate, same angle. I know I need to adjust them a little bit. Again, perfectly parallel, nice and straight, nice and sharp. Flat on the top of the shank, flat underneath that split shoulder. This kind of stage of ring, you need to slow down and really kind of get things accurate. And you just really gently touching things with your needle files, not just hacking into it with big files. So I've been filing it round. I'm going to thin off the bottom half a bit more, but it's reasonably accurate for what I want or where it's got to go. I need to work out how to cut that. Obviously once I split that, it's going to open up a bit more. May end up sizing it down a little bit more as well. But it's reasonably there, and I'll leave it all filed up until I've got it cut open, and then that's just sitting in position perfectly. And then before I solder it in, I'll get it all papered up perfectly, and then hopefully I can just solder it in, and it will need very, very little work to get it perfect. And look at that, nice big open shoulders, no solder joins, so that makes me happy. I hate solder joins there. Blech. Right, so we picking this back up. If you're doing this, you've got claws sticking out the bottom. Don't cut them straight off because you need it. You need that metal sticking down the bottom. So following that curve for the finger size, cut it off that way. So leave it a bit longer than you might imagine. I'm going to generally go around it and get rid of all the kind of blobby, rough solder joins. Get it all nice and sharp and all cleaned up. But next, I'm going to cut out this back bit. Looking at the picture, you can see, especially in that picture, oh there as well, look. Yeah, it's really, really open. So it looks like it's got rounded corners there, but I'm just going to do mine sharp. It looks sharp there. Yeah, it looks sharp in this one. But anyway, it's really open, so almost the depth of that is the width of it. So I'm going to cut it right open. So I'll just literally just use my dividers and just go around the back. Score parallel lines, just cut it out. Obviously be careful, don't put no accidents, don't put any little nicks in your collet. By the way, I just think of things while I'm filming, because I go ahead and do stuff just automatically how I do it, but I may as well explain the reasons why I do it. I had a little hole in there, remember, from fitting the stone earlier on. What I do is I cut 2 lines either side, go straight to one side, and I turn it around, and I do 2 parallel lines back to the other side, cut it out. So now I've got a square in the middle, and now I'm doing the same thing. I turn it around, do 1 line right down to the end, and then go to the other side, 1 line down to the end, and then go across. So I'm cutting out that half, do the same again the opposite side, and cutting out that half, and then that's nearly done. Just file it back a bit. I find this is the neatest, quickest, easiest, most accurate way you can cut something out when it's a little bit fiddly. It's a little bit difficult to hold, and you've got to be careful with these claws because you don't want to bend them. Alright, so I cut it out up to my line, and then I went round it with my square file to go into the corners, get it nice and even. I may bring it out a little bit more. I'll see how it looks once I've filed it. So I'm going to file down the outsides as well, so see how thin it looks once I've done that. Won't be hugely different. We still got to get rid of these blocks. So I've opened up, got rid of those bits out the sides. It's all opened up now. I like putting it with my shank. We're deliciously close to getting this finished. Still quite a long way, to be honest. This part of making a ring, you slow right down, just getting everything really perfect. I'll be going over it with files, every shape and every surface, every angle, just double checking everything. You've got to be careful. I don't want to put any little nicks in the claws. I want them to all be perfectly round. Another tool which for some reason you cannot buy, I have to make them myself, just like my extra large half round pliers you have to make yourself. These files, you don't seem to be able to buy them. It's basically just a parallel flat needle file, but one edge you have to grind off the teeth, so you've got this really nice bladed corner, but there's no teeth on the side, so I can put that on a flat surface and go right up to the claw. Is useful on this collet. I haven't got to worry about it cutting into the claw, and actually that kind of sharp corner will scratch into any kind of lumpy solder. Excuse me, any kind of lumpy solder I've got going up against the claw. So that's a benefit as well. Useful on top, be useful going inside. Just that wide flat surface is very good across flat surfaces on the things you're making. And just not having teeth on the side makes it a benefit going right up to edges and corners. Been around the whole thing with my file, getting everything nice and flat and nice and lined up, and all my gaps nice and parallel. All my edges are nice and sharp. Now, just to get, I mean, the solder joints are not bad, but to get them extra perfect, going on to my rubber wheels I was talking about earlier. Sharpen it. Sharpen it from both sides. Have a look directly across the centre, make sure it's like a blade, it should be really sharp. And then these take a bit of practice to use, but when you get good with them, they're amazing things. You can just touch it where you want to take metal away. And even if that solder joint, like that solder joint is pretty perfect, this is the most minimum little bead line of solder there. But if you loop it, that's a rough little patch. So just touch that blade on to zing it up, and it just cuts it back. And then when I polish over it, it's just going to look perfect. Now, making a special guest appearance in the video is another homemade little tool. Again, why can't you buy this shit? It's a like a mini split mandrel for papering. And what I do is this one, I mean this was one of these, yeah, it was one of these, and when it ran out I just ripped it all off, and this was quite good because the metal was really easy to cut down, but obviously you can't cut through a drill. But what else did I use? I don't know, if you just get something that went in your, oh, I know what it was, one of those cheapy diamond things. You can actually use your saw and cut down the ends of them. This really crappy metal, probably why they're so cheap to buy. Yeah, do your best to cut down quite far, about 8mm or so, and then push a blade in there, anything, just to open it up a little bit. Take a little section of paper, kind of like that-ish, fold over the end, about that much-ish, goes to the right with the back of it facing you, and just slot it in there. Oh, that's really loose. Fold it over again. Roll it around. There you go, a little mini paper whizzer. Now this is ideal for cleaning up claws. I've only got file marks on the bottom of one claw where I cleaned up that solder, but they're pretty good because I haven't really done anything to them. But basically for polishing, it's really good to go around it, the whole thing, any kind of rounded edge, just touch it with that really lightly, and then where that's a benefit as well as getting it perfectly smooth and papered, you can go around that side of the claw as well, which you need to do. Another benefit is when it comes to polishing, you've got your lines going that way, but on the polishing motor is spinning like that, yeah, so it polishes against the opposite direction to your papered lines, so they come out much quicker, much nicer. Good little tool. So that's 3 homemade tools featuring in this video. Because that's a small little thing, I can go around this side of the claw as well. Back on the shank. What am I doing? I just used my half rounds to pull those back, and put a very subtle curve on there. You can see on the picture there, very subtle curve outwards. It's not just going straight from the shank. It sort of curves out again, which I like that. A little bit of finesse in the design. I've lightly papered it, not perfectly. Filed the tops flat, kind of the same length, just by eye, I didn't measure them. You'll see me doing this a lot in my videos, using my saw blade, because it's a perfectly straight line. I'm looking at that, lining it up in the middle, looking at the gap between the tops of the shoulders, making sure it's going down through the middle, going directly down through the centre of the ring, and then looking at that point as well, making sure it's all lining up nicely through the centres, drawing a nice sort of halfway point. Then that's really useful to sort of check each side. I think my left side is more open than the right side. Yeah, let me try it a bit more. Like, you're not trying to make it look as good as possible. You're trying to line it up perfectly and seeing how bad it looks. That's what's going on in my mind. I'm looking for what's bad. I'm not trying to move it so it looks good and then I can go, ah, it's all right. No, I'm looking for ways to improve it. So I'm searching for the crappiness of it. Okay, right. So for putting this collet in, obviously you've got to go in there. So we're going to be cutting away a lot of the bottom one, and it's going to be cut at that angle, like the same angle what the claws are. So chop in. I'm going to cut through the solder joint right in the middle, and then I'll be cutting it back at the right angle. It's quite easy to see what kind of measurements you need just by putting that in front of it. Now, I'm not really a measurements kind of guy, not too much, but I like doing things by eye and feel, and I like checking with this, and I get a kick out of it when I get things really accurate, even though I didn't measure it while I was making it. But in this instance, it's going to be useful. I can literally just get a measurement for that distance, and then use that so I know how much to open that up as. Quite a lot, it looks. To open it up, I will simply just be pushing it up the ring stick very gently, giving it a twist. Make sure the ring doesn't do that. I want to keep it flat and parallel and nice. So this is a nice thing to do, just if you haven't got to worry about the inner circumference going out of shape. It's going to be going to stay nice and round. Okay, that's a little bit too open. Put it down. Yeah, let's start with that. That's not going right to the top corners. Do you remember I said I want to keep those a bit of a flat on top? It's kind of about halfway out, so that'll do. Looky, yeah, it looks about right. So where this is useful as well, obviously you've got your finger size marks on there, so without taking any measurements I can just see that size P on my stick is correct. So I just want to get it to be perfectly round and then naturally finish at P, so I can just stretch it up past P, sort of force the springiness past it, and there you go, that just sits at P now without me having to push it up. Measuring, putting that in position, sort of made a mark where the bottom ones touch, cut it, give myself plenty of space because it's much easier now. That's got to be perfectly straight here because my sides of that just line up nicely. Just use my file. I'm just going to file it back, just make sure I get the angle right. I'm taking a bit more off the bottom than the top. When I get close to the distance, so I'll start holding it, so I'm taking a bit more off the top as well, or evenly pushing it back, and being careful not to catch any teeth and move those, because where that was perfectly round and I've cut it back, that lines up really nicely. You start adjusting it, you've then got to pull it back by eye, and if it's a little bit wrong, it's a shame because it's not perfect anymore. Let's fast forward a few minutes. Be careful. I'm coming up to where I need this to be now. Being very careful with that bottom one. I really want the bottom one to fit really perfectly, and then the top one's to slide in position as well. I think the bottom one's more important because then if that's just right, then you've kept that inner circle perfectly circular. And the top ones, perhaps, it's not the end of the world if they have to sort of pull out a little bit. It's much worse if you've got to push them in, because then you're changing that curvature. But that wouldn't happen anyway because you just take the bottom ones out a little bit more. But stop occasionally and have a look at it from the side. Make sure your distances like there to there is the same both sides. I need to sharpen that one up a little bit. You have to make sure it's all looking like even and good. You're not sort of filing more one side than the other. So take your time. And can I just say again, no solder joins. So I've filed that back enough now, I think, for this to go in. Now, the bottom of that should be exactly the bottom of that where it needs to sit, and then the top of that, according to my design, should sit, looks like just under. The same to just under. I think just under is a little bit nice, then it can have a nice little step on the top if that's all polished out, it'll be a nice little design feature. Not really a feature, little design flair. Now this size is massive, but there you go, it sits in there and then pops back out again. But basically it's correct. Now where I was stupid, I can't finish this ring 100% for you because I'm getting that cast and that cast as separate bits. So that's probably quite good, that's a big size, because when that's cast it's easy to size it down and make it fit someone's finger rather than put a piece in and size it up. And this also is a touch too big for the stone, which I did on purpose because cast anyway, things shrink a tiny bit, like sort of about 3%. We used to kind of guess in the UK. It kind of scales down a little bit. So when you're making things with casting, you do have to, when you're working to hundredths of a mil, so it's nice if you can make it just a touch too big and then it should shrink down and be perfect. Now I learnt the hard way. I made a platinum diamond cluster, pear-shaped cluster recently for a shop in Japan, and the person setting it was like swearing about me because it was too small for the stones. I mean, they got them in there, but they said a few stones had to kind of just overlap a little bit to get them all in, and that was my bad. But I had no idea how much things shrink in Japan. I don't know what they're doing at the casters. They're very good companies, very, very good casting, but boy do they shrink a lot. So now I know that. I made this a touch more too big than I used to do, so hopefully when I get it back it should be correct for the stone. Okay, so it's the end of the show. Let's have a look what you've done. If you were here making this for me, I would take it off you and fill you with dread as I pick up my 10 times loop and my digital caliper measuring gauge. I'm going to measure what you've made by hand to hundredths of a mil and then look at you disappointedly if it's more than like 0.1 of a mil difference. Okay, so look at my angles. Yeah, solder's nice because I used the rubber wheel. It's all cut back nice and sharp. A little bit of a lump on the top there, but it's okay, I guess. Inside, solder all the way around inside the claws, important. Nice and round, no nicks, no accidental little bang marks or plier marks on the claws. Claws are nice and straight, so having a general look around it. What else? Looking down on it. Are the claws all sort of pointing straight at me at all perfect symmetrical angles? The metal block test, I put it there. Are both claws touching at the same time, and is it standing up straight, not rattling about, not doing that on all four sides? Look at that, solid. 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 What's going on there? A little bit of a wobble. Let's have a look at that. Go away, I'm human. Right, this is it. This is the one. I'm measuring the gaps in between the claws. This will tell you a lot about the accuracy. 11.39 that side. Let's go to the opposite side. 11.41. Ooh, that's all right, mate. 0.02. 200th of a mil. 8.81. 8.75. It's not quite right. Is it on a bit of solder lump there? Come on, Chris. I forgot what the other one was now. 8.75 again, yeah. 8.79. It's got to make sure it's right at the bottom. .76. Okay, so I'm looking at your parallelness of that bezel all the way around. Is it nice and straight? Not like going whoop, like you overfiled it in the middle and then didn't straighten it out. Looking at the gap now, is that nice and straight? And that curve is an important one. Is that the highest part of the curve directly in the center? That's really important for this to look nice. Both sides, obviously. Is the curve nice and even? Going down nice and sharp, not all blobs of solder all over it. Yeah, nice and parallel gap here. Should be a nice sort of letterbox hole. Nice and sharp there. Claws, not all filed up wrong, not all banged about. Claws, nice even length, not too long, not too short, so it's good for casting. Nice and even. This is pretty good. I give myself. Consider it this. I mean, this collet went quite well because all claws went on first attempt. Solder had no issues. Didn't struggle to get one soldered. Because it happens sometimes. Yeah, they all went on first attempt. All the correct angle, no problem soldering. Looks quite neat. I had a little bit of a wobble on that metal block test, but it's really for a handmade collet. That's really accurate. So I'm quite happy with that. So that's that. I mean, I'd call in this video a full instructional guide, but it wasn't really. I didn't go into as much depth as I have done before, or as much as I could have. Really, the point of this video was explaining that if you're a jeweler and you're offering to make things for people, they're gonna come to you with a design and a stone which is not really suitable, but with a bit of thought, a bit of sketching and thinking about it a little while, most things are usually possible, like within reason. Depends what their budget is, of course. And yeah, so I've got a cushion-shaped stone, sorry, that will sit in there, like set well, without any metal sticking out over the edges when you look down on it. And it looks really similar to that. Got these perfect straight sides in between the claws, and obviously the customer likes this ring, they want that effect, but their stone isn't right. But you made it work somehow. Now I'm going to drill this out for diamonds, but I'm not bothering with channel set like princess cut diamonds. This has got square back holes as well, which I can do. I just don't bother. I don't think it's worth it. So they'll just be round holes going on the inside of mine. And what else? Yes, this one, I didn't print out that picture, but do you remember at the start of the video, there was that photo of it, like from the side, looking at the shank. And the shanks were all like twisted, and this was like a 15 grand ring, 15.5 grand, whatever it was. Ah, imagine that. I mean, you kind of, if you just clicked buy and it arrived in the post, you look at it and it would just be, it doesn't look very nicely polished in there. Shank will be all twisted. I wouldn't be happy with that at all, 15 grand. What are you doing to me? Right, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, all that, and see you next time. People are shocking me online with their bodge jobs, the way they do things, so I'm getting so many ideas all the time for new videos, just correcting how other people make things wrong. I want to be able to at least show everyone that there is a better way, and then it's up to you to decide whether you're going to bother doing it my way or not, because my way is going to be more difficult, but you will get a much higher level of quality finish. Next.